that song certainly tells about the story of my little guitar and how my music career began, and it has been a wonderful part of my life for 60 years plus now, and I still enjoy playing and play once or twice and sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. I'm going to be playing 4 times this week. There was another interesting thing that happened in the late 40s I thought you might find interesting. We had talked about a deputy sheriff and a shooting that took place. There was another deputy sheriff about that same era. His name was Walter Teets, and he lived in the same house where my son Ricky lives now, a little log cabin down here. And Walter had a horse, and he rode that horse around through the community. I saw him many times and knew he was alone. But the incident that I wanted to tell about, I didn't actually see, but I remember well when it happened, and I was told by reliable sources. There were a group of men up in the Besttown area that wore cowboy hats and drank a lot of moonshine whiskey. And they imagined themselves as cowboys. And they worked not only in making whiskey, but most of them were in the timber business in some fashion. And so they had trucks and things, and they got intoxicated one day and tied a treetop to the back of a truck. And they came through town dragging that treetop behind the truck. And as they would approach road signs, they would go toward the road sign, and then just before they reached it, they would turn the wheel, and it would swing the treetop around, and it'd cut the signs off right at ground level. It's like toothpicks, And they went through just demolishing the signs. Well, what was so humorous, I guess, about the thing, as tragic as it was, this Walter Teets was chasing the truck on a horse. And, I found out that he actually made some arrests. They pulled into a place as they were leaving town to discard the tree, and he passed them, didn't see them there, and then whenever they came on up the road, he got in pursuit again, and there were some shots fired, and he identified them. Anyway, I thought that was a pretty interesting little incident that happened here in Burstable Springs.
What date would you put on that?
I'd put that at about 47 to 49, somewhere right in there. Tell you something that I thought pretty interesting. In the early 50s, my dad had got a new job as a salesman and was now making a good living, and things were getting better for all of us. He got him a new car, and we could travel around to other towns, and Bill Monroe at about that time was having a down time in his career. And Sunday afternoon baseball was so big at that time. Oh, every little town the size of Burstable had a good baseball team. And that was the highlight of the week. So my Ola over here had 2 teams. Bill Monroe had a baseball team, and in fact he had 2 baseball teams. He had one that played regularly in Nashville, and then one that went on the road. And the one on the road would play local teams, and it was made up of the guys that played the bluegrass music. They doubled as baseball players. I have a picture of the team, and at that time a string bean was the pitcher. I thought that was pretty interesting to see old string bean decked out in a baseball suit. Well, I got to go to Viola when Bill Monroe came to play baseball and music in Viola. Another interesting thing that happened about that time, TV came to the mountain. Oh, how wonderful that was. You know, all we'd had prior to that was, of course, radio, and everybody would gather at people's houses that were fortunate enough to be able to afford a TV. And I don't recall the year that that we got ours, but it was probably about 51 or 52. And Mitchell Hobbs ran the store down at the top of the mountain, and he had a TV in the store, and he had livestock feed in the aisle as you entered the front door, and that people used that for the theater seats to watch television. And they would gather there and watch programs on TV all day long. And Mitchell, the post office had moved from that area up to the building in front of the Church of Christ, and Mitchell would want to go get his mail, and he had a custom of driving real slow all the way through town and then back to his business. He didn't want to interrupt the TV viewers. He only had one door in his store, and that was the front door. That would be illegal today, of course, but anyway, Mitchell would ease over to the door and slip out and lock the door with the customer still inside the building. And they couldn't get out. They would eat candy and ice creams and drink soft drinks, but they couldn't. They were honest, and Mitchell knew that. They were the ones he made his living from. So they would watch TV while Mitchell was gone, and he'd finally come back 20 or 30 minutes later, and some of them wouldn't even know he'd been gone, you know. When they started to leave, they'd figure up the tab, you know, and chances are he would charge it anyway, a nickel for this and a nickel for that. And, it was a wonderful, wonderful time in Beersheba Springs. People connected to the rest of the world, you know, and a thing that I left out that happened in the late 40s was the movies that used to be shown at the schoolhouse. An old man named Pearsall would come and show movies, if my memory's correct, on Tuesday night. There would be quite a crowd come to watch Billy the Kid and Fuzzy, and he always had a Cyril. And it would end, you know, with a cliffhanger where Tarzan or whoever had jumped off of a cliff or was about to get eat up with a lion, and it would cut off, and you'd have to come back next week to see what happened. Cost a dime to get in. He'd take the little ticket stub and put them in a box and shuffle them up and give away $1 midway of the show. And boy, sometimes you could go to the show and pay your way in and end up 90 cents to the good, which was a whopping total. He sold candy, you know. I don't think he had popcorn. But well, the early 50s came and went in Beersheba Springs, and by about 1954, we had a little family group called the Hill Family. We would tour the area schools. We called our band Don Hill and the Sandy Mountain Gang. The Lord only knows where the Sandy Mountain came from, but that's what we called ourselves. And we figured up at one time, and we played in about every schoolhouse in Grundy County, and there were nearly 30 of them at that time. Charged quarter to get in or something like that, and give the school 40%, and we got the other 60. Sometimes we had enough people there to pay our gas bill, you know. But we enjoyed it. And about that time we met up with some people over in this valley, 2 girls and a boy. Betty Wanamaker, her brother Monty Wanamaker, and a cousin of theirs, Sarah Alice Stanton, who and they sung as a trio. They called themselves the Cumberland Valley Trio. We were asked to provide accompaniment for their singing. They literally had a radio program down at McMinnville. Local radio had come to the area by that time, WMMT. We modernized Middle Tennessee. And we would go to the radio station and accompany them, and we made friends with the management, and wasn't long till we had our own show going down there. So we played on up till I went in the Army in about October of 1957, and an unusual thing happened, and again this involved Bill Monroe. Bill Monroe was still experiencing a downtime in his career. In fact, he had got so far down that he didn't even have a band. And he was traveling with a guy from up at Sparta that we had got acquainted with named Bill Jones. And that was the first I ever heard of the initials, LBJ, because he was such a guy that they nicknamed him Lion Bill Jones, LBJ. While I was away in the Army, my family said that an old model Cadillac pulled in the driveway one day, and Lion Bill Jones was driving and had a passenger that he identified as Bill Monroe. Well, my brother said, I just didn't believe it. Said the man didn't look like Bill Monroe. He'd seen pictures of him. And so they invited him to come in the house, and when Bill Monroe got out of the car and put on his famous cowboy hat, Raymond looked at him again and said, you know, I believe it is Bill Monroe. They got inside and got the music to going. Raymond said, as Bill played that famous mandolin, said, there's no question, you know, this is Bill Monroe. Turned out they had a program at Altamont that night scheduled, and my family went and accompanied them as the Bluegrass Boys and Girls, and my dad went. And I wished I had been here so I could tell today that I played with Bill Monroe, but unfortunately I was several thousand miles from here in Aschaffenburg, Germany. You know, while I was in Germany, that I became an alcoholic. And when I returned, the next few years of my life was just practically, I talk about it because I don't want to ever forget it. But I became a disgrace to myself and my family and even the community, because I used to have a little business down the road where I sold alcohol illegally, and but I finally found the solution to my problem, and I haven't had a drink today since 1975. For that, I'm eternally grateful.